Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the channel. We are back out here with the GSX and had some news I wanted to share with you guys and give you basically an update on how this whole thing went with swapping our clutch system over and swapping our transmission and transfer case over. It ended up being a pretty big project. We got it all done. It took me between work and working on this, it took me about a week to get everything put together after I disassembled it. Get all the fluids swapped out, get everything put back together and drive it. And funny thing happened, well, not so funny, but on the back of the transmission, the only bolt that comes from the block and goes into the transmission, it's called the crankwalk bolt, and that's the bolt that a lot of people have pointed at and say basically that if it's missing, it allows the transmission to pivot when the clutch is engaged and basically puts a lot of lateral thrust on your thrust washers inside of your engine, on the ends of your crank there, and it can cause your block to crank walk, and it'll ruin your crank, ruin your block, and all that fun. So story is, I was driving home from work, testing it out, taking it easy, being nice on it during braking miles, and about 60 miles an hour to 75 miles an hour, you could feel a pretty good vibration coming from the driveline. And if I pushed the clutch pedal all the way down to the floor, it would disappear. If I put it in any gear, it would come back. You could kind of feel it in first, not too much in second. Once you got into third and fourth and fifth, it was really apparent that there was something wrong. So I brought it back to the house, I parked it, waited for my next day off, and sure enough, the crankwalk bolt had completely stripped. And if you guys remember in the installation video, I pulled some big threads that somebody had put in the face of that hole. It's actually countersunk, so the dowel pin in the rear sits inside of it. And inside of that dowel pin goes an M8 by 125 by 60 bolt. The threads were in there. I put it in with some Loctite, and apparently that wasn't enough, so it ended up pulling itself out, and it was loose. I could spin it, tighten it with my fingers, and it just pulled all the threads out. So that unfortunately meant that we had to pull everything back apart again, and the transmission, transfer case, exhaust, everything came back out of the car, and I had to drill and tap that hole and fix the threads in it, and that was a bear. I did not have a good time doing that. Once I got the transmission back out on the ground, that hole in the back was stripped completely out. I measured the depth of it, and I attempted to fill it with aluminum weld, heating up the hole with MAP gas and melting some aluminum brazing rods in, then re-drilling the hole and retapping it for an M8 by 125, and it didn't hold. I got it in there, it started to work. I didn't like the way it was. There was a little bit of an air pocket, a couple of little bubbles inside of it, and that caused the threads to basically shatter after I tightened it up a couple of times. Just wanted to make sure, don't want to put everything back together and have it fail. So I ended up having to re-tap out that hole and delete the rear pin, the dowel pin in the back there, and I tapped the hole that goes through the block into the transmission with a big bolt. So we have no dowel pin in the back anymore. I only have a dowel in the front to locate the transmission. Instead of in the back, I have a massive M14 by 1.5 by 60 bolt. And I also tapped the hole in the block to fit that M14. So there's no wiggle room, it's not gonna twist. And I bolted it back up, got it all put back together, drove it. No more shimmy, no more shake, and problem solved. I've actually heard a couple other people on dsmtuners.com have used that same solution. But anyways, back to what we were talking about initially here. The XTD clutch system that I picked up, it was obviously a budget system. You guys have probably seen a bunch of them on eBay and all over the place, and you can read some great reviews on them and some bad reviews on them, and it's kind of a toss-up. And this is just my personal experience so far. The clutch held up fine, even with the wobble that it had, the transmission. I put it back together. Everything felt great. And I've been driving it around. I passed my braking miles about 200 miles ago and turned the boost back up to about 15 pounds, and have just been having some fun with it. So nothing's hurt anymore. It drives great, and I figured I'd give you guys some info on how that whole process went. Basically a first week of driving review, we'll call it. So if you're deciding on a new clutch system and you don't have a $1,000 bill to throw at it, you're doing it yourself and you want to go budget, the full-faced XTD Stage 4 street disc seems to do fine for me. Hopefully it works out for you. First things that I noticed after getting this thing put back together, it was extremely grabby when I first went to drive it. You'd put it in first gear or reverse, whatever it was, and it actually kind of felt like it was shuddering a little bit, and like it was almost like, I don't know, it was you let your foot out and it would kind of bounce. It felt like it was making contact and not making contact, and that's just the flywheel and the clutch disc mating surfaces. They're all touching for the first time, and you have to get some of that material from the disc to embed on the flywheel. And it was a little bouncy, it was a little tough in the beginning. It was super grabby, and I thought that was a problem, but I learned very quickly that after the first 100 miles, the grabbiness kind of went away. A lot of slipping it in first and second, it really helped, and the more I drove, the better it got. So the first couple of days, I heat cycled it twice a day, just driving it around. The first day I did 2 times, the second day I did 2 times, and it was basically just drives from here to work. There'd be short trips on the highway, a little 15-minute drive there, and then I would drive it back home. And before I'd come home, I would slip it a little bit more as I was coming into my driveway, getting ready to park it for the night, and just heat it up real warm and then let it cool off overnight, and repeat that process for a few days. And it basically bed itself in pretty quickly just from following that. And I've also seen some guys that pick up brand new clutch systems and they'll put the e-brake on and they'll put it in first gear and rev it up to 45 or 5,000 RPMs and slowly let the clutch out just so it spins, it slips itself. I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to do it the proper way. I don't want to have to pull that transmission out at all for any other reason for a long time. The other thing, if you guys swap your clutch out, you want to make sure that you do the correct pedal height adjustment. That was one of the things that I was worried about initially, because I got a brand new master cylinder, a brand new slave cylinder, new clutch, new throwout bearing, new pivot ball, new shift fork, pressure plate, all that stuff. It's all brand new stuff, so I wanted it all to be fresh. So when I got it all put back together, driving it initially, I realized that the pedals engagement was a little too low, so make sure you adjust your master cylinder rod and make sure that your system's bled. Also, I went and replaced the slave line with a steel braided line you can kind of see poking out right here, and deleted the accumulator on the front of the transmission, and that makes bleeding so much easier. The bleeding process before, I'd probably have to pump the pedal and bleed it 15 to 20 times before I felt comfortable that I got all the air out of it. I'd used a vacuum bleeder a couple of times. That didn't really seem to help. I know you can gravity bleed it if you got a lot of time. I just wanted to get it done fast, and replacing that accumulator with the slave line, or stainless steel line rather, it bolts right in here behind this plate, and it just passes its way down to the slave cylinder, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So we're going to head out on the road here in a little bit and do a little bit of driving, and basically just show you guys how easy it is to shift now. And I'm honestly super thrilled with this thing. I can't believe that for the price that I paid for the whole kit, it works so well. Maybe I'll be eating my words later, but so far so good. I don't have any complaints with it. The only difference that I've noticed, the real main difference in daily drivability, was putting on the lightened flywheel, their XTD chromoly flywheel. You definitely have to rev it a little bit higher RPMs to get the thing to start rolling. If you're at a stoplight, or you're at a stop sign in traffic, or you're just trying to go up a hill or something, you got to feed it a little bit more RPM to get it to start rolling. That's the only thing that's changed on the drivability, and I think that's because the other flywheel was so heavy, the stock one. The rotational mass of it, the inertia would help push you forward as you let the clutch out. This, you got to kind of feather the throttle, if that makes sense to you. So you're kind of giving it a little bap, 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 and then you just get out on the highway there, or on the roadway, or whatever you're doing. But from a stop, you got to give it a little bit more juice, not a ton. After all is said and done, with the cost of the fluids, the cost of the clutch kit, the new rear main seal, because you're going to do that while you're in there, the replacement master cylinder, slave cylinder, the brake fluid, brake parts cleaner, I'm in around, I want to say $500 or so, $550 at the end of the day, as opposed to going with a more higher priced ACT system or South Bend system, where you get just the clutch, the disc, and the pressure plate. That alone can run $450, $500 if you're just buying those parts. Then you still have to source the flywheel, which can run $350 to $500. I mean, Fidanza has a kit you can use where it has a replacement friction surface, so you can just unbolt the ring and replace the friction surface later on if you want. You can also mix and match. So if this clutch disc doesn't survive and I burn it up, I'll probably keep the pressure plate and the flywheel and just pick up an ACT street disc and throw a street disc in there. I didn't realize that you could do that, and I never thought about it. I thought you bought a kit and you had to stay with that kit and its specific components, but you actually can mix and match quite a bit. So learned something there through this adventure. Driving it around town so far, there's no slip at all. And actually, something funny, I was in my math comp table checking it out. You know, after you drive around for a little while, in your data logs, you can right click on your data log and do the math comp adjust combined fuel trim using the math comp wizard. And I noticed that it was asking for less fuel in a whole bunch of spots. So I'm wondering if there was a significant amount of slipping going on that I just didn't catch until that day I went to go do a pull on the highway, and I felt it. Because, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's because of the street light or the lighter flywheel. Maybe that has something to do in the math comp with, like, we're not changing the airflow of anything by changing the clutch and flywheel, but we are changing the amount of load that's on the engine, spinning it up to that RPM. So I'm thinking maybe just a lighter flywheel helped things out a little bit for the better. And I had to do a couple minor adjustments and tweaks there. As far as all that goes, though, everything drivability wise is fine. There's no crazy issues with anything. There's no more vibrations with anything. The engagement's great. I turned it up from wastegate to 15 pounds and drove it at 15 pounds for a little while, and 15 pounds of boost, and I haven't had any problems. It doesn't feel like it slips. It doesn't feel too grabby. I think we're gonna go test this thing out and do a couple of rips up the road and just see how everything melds together. Alright boys, we're gonna go for a little drive down the hill. Started to introduce a little bit of boost around the 525 mile mark, and this thing feels great. I mean, I can shift down into third if I want to, give it a little bit of gas. Pulls perfect, doesn't hesitate, it's not too grippy up top or sputtery or slipping or none of that. So I'm actually quite pleased with my discount clutch that I got from XTD. Honestly, I was really nervous putting it in, and like some other eBay options, you get what you pay for, and I was really nervous. I had faith in it because I'd seen so many good reviews, but I was still nervous. You know, there's always that thought in the back of your mind, like, if I pull all this stuff out, replace everything, put it all together, will it even go into gear? And I had no issues with this so far. So, like I said, I really can't complain. This thing drives perfect. It was grabby in the beginning, like I said, many times now. That's the only thing I'm going to take away from this, is make sure, you spend the time to break it in. After 100 miles, the braking starts to set in, and the grabbiness starts to dissipate. It gets less grabby and less grabby and less grabby, and eventually it's nice and smooth. Well, boys, we are back driving. If you caught that little breakdown, that was totally inadvertent, but we ended up losing our MAF signal completely. There's something wrong with the pigtail harness there. So I had to prematurely switch over to speed density and fired it right back up. We are on our way home. Had to dial in the VE table on the fly just to get it to restart. Normally you can kick it into limp mode. It didn't want to go into limp mode. When you disable the MAF sensor or unplug it, you can get home. I don't know why, this didn't want to do it. So I've also noticed some funny readings coming off the MAF sensor for quite a while now. I didn't know what exactly it was. I didn't know if it was the MAF or if it was something to do with the harness or a plug being loose. Maybe, I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint it, and I would see random little spikes in my logs. Like boost would go from 16 degrees in mercury, or 16 inches of mercury in vacuum, and it would bounce between 16 and 15 and 16 and 15 like 5 times every half a second. Okay, so I found it in the log where it started to act up. Now you can see right here, this point in the log is where everything just dropped out for a second, and then afterwards you can see how the boost reference is starting to bounce around right there. If you pay attention to boost and you pay attention to coolant temp and timing right here, timing always is changing when you're driving, but pay attention to the coolant temp and the boost, and I'm just going to play this forward in real time. You can see the temperature going all over the place, down to 170, 160, flying back up. I don't know why it's doing that. That's something that's been happening randomly for a while. At first I thought it was the ECU. I had it sent out, it came back, and it was fine. I just checked it out, and once I disabled the MAF sensor, all of this is gone now. I don't know why that would cause these readings to change so much, but it did. Anyways, the rest of this log is like that. This is actually the log where it cut out when we were driving down the hill. Gave it a little blip of boost right here. We hit, what, just 8 psi, and got 0.7 degrees of knock, even though the air fuel trims are perfectly lined up. I was messing with the timing tables earlier, so got to go back and fix a couple things. Anyways, it's not about that. You can see the graph for the boost line is kind of sketchy looking. It actually waves around quite a bit. If I zoom in, you can kind of see it shudders a lot. And then all of a sudden right here, everything just drops off, the car shuts off, and we got one spike from our wideband trying to pick back up the air-fuel ratio, but it couldn't. So obviously there's something wrong with the harness on the MAF pigtail, so I'm going to inspect that tomorrow in daylight. Honestly, now that I think about it, maybe I pulled the connector a little too hard when I was working on it or something, or maybe my MAF sensor's going out. Either way, it's not a big deal. We switched it right over to speed density, and I'll show you that log right here. I started the car up. Right here in the beginning, I switched it over. I fired it up. Hot start enrichment kicked in, and then the wideband factor, the green line drops, and then kind of starts to squiggle up high, showing that I'm really lean, and you can actually see right here, combined fuel trim shows 12.1%, so it needs 12.1% of fuel added to the idle cells in the VE table, and I messed around with it for a minute, and within probably 1 minute, I got it to line up back where it used to, and the rest of the log looked okay at cruise until I started driving down the road. You can see there's a lot of work that has to be done with that VE table. Obviously, we didn't go into any boost or try to hurt anything, but figured I'd share that with you. What a great problem, talking about how I love everything and the clutch is so great, and then the car just dies. Well, I guess that's what you get sometimes, and don't tug on the plugs for your electronics, guys. So far, all I gotta say is my cheap XTD clutch, it feels great. Everything feels so nice driving around. It grips, it pulls, it doesn't slip at all, it doesn't have any problems with engagement, and like I said before, that little bit of first day, first 100 miles or so that you put on it in city traffic, driving stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, you'll feel it's grabby, but after it works its way in just a little bit, everything feels perfect now. That grabbiness goes right away, and I would totally endorse you grabbing an XTD Stage 4 system for your car if you blow your stock clutch like I did, or you can spend the big bucks, get one of the better brands that, there's tons of them. You can pick ACT, South Bend, Clutch Masters, Comp Clutch, XTD. There's so many of them out there. it's really up to personal preference and what you want to spend your money on. And I went cheap with this one and figured I'd share my experience with you guys. So hopefully this helps you guys when you make your decision. Just remember to always grab an OEM throwout bearing. It doesn't hurt while you're pulling this thing apart to replace your fork and your pivot ball, and make sure for 100% certain that your crank walk bolt is in there, because I had to do this job twice. Don't do the job twice. Make sure everything's perfect on your first go at it. This is my first 2G transmission swap and clutch job. So it's really similar to the 1G, but that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Anyways, guys, that's it, boys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up down below. Comment, subscribe, and don't forget to check out todaysprojectguide.com. We have a bunch of new merch that's on there. We've got a bunch of new shirt designs and a whole bunch of stuff that we just put up over the last month. If you guys want to further support the channel and pick up a t-shirt or a sweater or a water bottle, whatever you guys want to do, it would really be appreciated, and it would definitely help further this channel along and help us continue to put out more content and more videos like this little one here, where we found that we have a short in our MAF sensor. Anyways, guys, it's been fun. We'll see you in the next one.